Hello everybody, it is both an honour and a genuine pleasure to join you in celebrating 10 years of the Department of Disability Studies at the University of Malta. My name is Angharad Beckett, and in addition to being a professor at the University of Leeds in the UK, I'm very proud to be an honorary member of this wonderful department. Now, my keynote today is entitled Riding Waves and Making Waves, Lessons from Disability Studies in Malta. This occasion represents not just a departmental milestone, important as that is, but a testament to Malta's remarkable leadership in critical disability studies. And it's their leadership and the distinct approach that I believe they've developed to disability studies that will be the focus of my lecture today. But before I get into my lecture proper, I hope you will permit me to begin with some personal memories and reflections. My relationship with the community of scholars, activists and advocates in the area of disability rights and inclusion in Malta spans more than a decade. In fact, I fondly recall my first encounter with any of my colleagues in Malta, and that was when I examined Anne-Marie Calus's doctoral thesis at the University of Leeds. Anne-Marie, ever the perfectionist and already a formidable scholar, seemed almost disappointed when we informed her that there were no corrections to be made to her thesis. That's a memory that still makes me giggle. A few years later, I visited the beautiful island of Malta for the first time. I fell in love with the island. I fell in love with the Maltese people. And I came as part of a cost action network focused on disabled children's right to play. That network introduced me to practitioners like Veronica Montanaro and Maria Mitzi. Veronica's work challenges us to rethink how speech and language therapy can empower disabled children and families, and I'm now really privileged to be part of her doctoral journey, co-supervising her PhD with Anne-Marie Calus, where she is developing critical perspectives that I think have the potential to radically imagine speech and language therapy practice. Maria Mitzi, who to my joy, I subsequently discovered was a former student of Vicky Gauci, having trained to become an occupational therapist with her, has now, I believe, become somewhat of a social media star known as the Maltese OT. And through her warm and engaging online presence, she shares practical tips with disabled families on how to support their child's independence, to facilitate inclusive play and learning. I am certain that her work has brought much reassurance and empowerment to many families. Of course, supervising Vicky's PhD remains one of the highlights of my career. Her research, which employed assemblage theory, was truly groundbreaking, offering a fresh perspective on how disability, work and assistive technology are interconnected, and her work continues to push the boundaries of how we think about inclusion and accessibility within employment. Later, of course, I met Amy Camilleri Zahra and learnt much from her powerful research on intersectionality, particularly the experiences of disabled women. Amy has a way of challenging my assumptions in all the best ways, with warmth, but also a feisty approach that keeps me on my toes, and rightly so. I still smile thinking about a lively exchange we had over the value of personal narrative, where she gave me a reality check that I needed. It was an important reminder to me as a non-disabled researcher in the field of that first important lesson in allyship, to listen, 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 and when you think you've listened enough, listen some more. You know, Vicky and Amy are two women I deeply admire, not in that negative inspiration porn sense, but truly for their strength, their determination, their creativity and their humanity. Both have navigated the challenges of acquiring significant impairments and confronting a deeply disabling world. They've transformed those profound and I feel certain very painful experiences, and I'm talking here of not just physical pain, but psychological, perhaps even spiritual at times, into powerful research and advocacy grounded in their lived experience. For me, together they exemplify the scholar-activist ethos that lies at the very heart of disability studies. But of course, the wider disability studies community in Malta is extraordinary. It extends beyond the department itself, with many researchers contributing important work whilst being influenced by the department's vision and leadership, and sometimes associated with the department in various ways. Kurt Borg's critical explorations of pain, trauma and narrative are fascinating and important. Andrew Azzopardi has been pivotal in fostering inclusive dialogue and critical reflection across social policy and education, and I deeply admire his dedication to public scholarship. Sean Grech has long been like a firework in the field, exploding conventions, questioning perspectives and continually challenging the dominance of global north narratives in disability studies. In fact, Sean and I recently collaborated as experts advising the UN and the World Health Organization as they started to think about the next World Report on Disability, and I was struck then by how someone I've long seen as a theoretician operates in policy circles, translating complex ideas into actionable recommendations. And Sean's ongoing commitment to open science has also been invaluable in advancing access to knowledge in disability studies globally. Sean and I share this commitment as founding editors of open access journals, working as we do to make knowledge more accessible and inclusive worldwide. Now, there are so many more people I could mention and contributions I might honour, but to conclude this opening section, I just want to share a memory that I particularly treasure. And it's a moment from the 2018 International Conference that was hosted by the department in Malta. I'll never forget Elvira Pasaila's excitement when she showed me the display of artwork made by disabled children using the wheelchair painting technique. Whilst it was Elvira who had created this opportunity for the children, she was beaming with pride at their creativity and their achievements. Moments like these capture the heart of what, at its best, disability studies can achieve, I think, creating space for disabled people to participate in all aspects of life, express themselves, and reshape the narratives around them. So I'm deeply proud to stand with you all as we celebrate the transformative power of disability studies in Malta and beyond. And today, I hope, is about honouring this rich history and envisaging a bold future. So now to begin the lecture proper. Today, what I want to do is to explore how Malta's unique contribution to disability studies over the last 10 years, in fact longer than that, reflects and illuminates broader developments in our field. As I reflected on how to honour this anniversary, I found myself thinking about disability studies itself as a field, one that is still, relatively speaking, in its youth. Whilst its roots in activism stretch back much further, as a recognised academic field, it really only emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Now, to put that in perspective, sociology has been around since the 19th century. Cultural studies, still considered a relatively new field, predates us by several decades. So you might say that disability studies is in its adolescence. It's well established, it's vibrant, but it's still growing. And like many teenagers, it sometimes displays characteristic traits that make sense in that light. There's the occasional over-enthusiasm for the latest theoretical fashion, a tendency towards dramatic reactions when views differ, and a passionate intensity of its convictions. But also, like adolescence, it's an exciting, somewhat turbulent period of rapid development and remarkable potential. And I think that the growing pains that we have had as a field are part of our maturation. Now, this reflection led me to an unexpected framework for understanding our field's development. It reminded me of Robert Siegler's theory of overlapping waves. Siegler developed this theory to understand how children learn, showing that rather than progressing through distinct stages, children maintain multiple strategies for learning about the world simultaneously, with different approaches rising and falling in prominence like waves on a shore. Now, the more I considered it, the more I realised this offers us an illuminating way to think about how disability studies itself has learned and grown. Just as Siegler showed that children don't simply abandon earlier strategies when they develop new ones, disability studies hasn't progressed in a simple linear fashion, where each new theoretical approach replaced that which came before. Instead, I think what we've seen is multiple approaches coexisting and complementing each other, like waves overlapping on a beach. Now, I see three main waves in our field's development, though like Siegler, I emphasise that these are not strictly chronological, but overlapping approaches that continue to enrich each other. The first wave emerged from activism and the social model, transforming how we understand disability. The second wave brought vital critiques, feminist scholars challenging male-dominated perspectives, researchers highlighting how early work reflected primarily white, heterosexual and global north experiences. And a third wave bringing increased theoretical sophistication, engagement with critical theory, intersectionality, new materialism, and so on. What fascinates me about Malta's contribution, and what I want to explore with you today, is how this department has demonstrated the wisdom of maintaining multiple approaches simultaneously. Like a skilled learner who knows when to apply different strategies, Malta's scholars have shown how to engage with sophisticated theory whilst maintaining practical impact, shown how to embrace new perspectives whilst holding firm to foundational principles. So, let's begin by examining that transformative first wave. The first wave of disability studies, of course, emerged from revolution, from activism into academia, specifically from disabled people's collective resistance to their oppression in the 1970s and early 1980s. A major breakthrough came when activists who were members of the Union of the Physically Impaired Against Segregation, or UPIAS, developed an idea that we have now come to call the social model of disability. It wasn't a theory, it was an analytical tool or an oppositional device, allowing disabled people to articulate the nature of their oppression. Importantly, what it did was it transferred or translated disability from being a personal trouble to a public issue. The social model made that crucial distinction between impairment, physical, sensory or cognitive difference, and disability, the social exclusion and discrimination faced by people with impairments. Disability, it argued, was created by society's failure to accommodate human difference. Now, the social model functions, I'm sure you'll agree, is what educationalists term a threshold concept. Once you've understood it, you simply can't ununderstand it. You can't unthink it. It fundamentally transforms how you see the world, and for many disabled people, it fundamentally transforms how they see themselves. Like one of Siegler's foundational strategies, the social model then became a fundamental tool that would continue to be vital even as new approaches emerged. And that's because its power lies in how it fundamentally changes not just how we think about disability, but how we analyse and challenge disabling barriers. As Anna Lawson and I have shown in our analysis, this revolutionary reconceptualisation of disability profoundly shaped the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And its influence appears not just in the Convention's explicit rejection of the individual, or what is often called medical model, but in its entire framework for understanding disability as arising from an interaction between impairment and environmental barriers. Now, Malta's engagement with this first wave demonstrates something remarkable about how transformative ideas can take root in different contexts. A few years ago, I had the pleasure to listen to Mr. Joe Camilleri speak of the early days of the disabled people's movement in Malta and the importance of the social model. And it's clear to me that the model has operated as an oppositional device in Malta in just the way that Tom Campbell and I found that it had operated in the UK. It helped disabled people to articulate their grievances, the injustices they faced, to forge a collective identity, to fight for equality of opportunity, and so on. So Malta's engagement with the first wave was profound, but it was also sustained. Take, for example, the work of Vicky Gauci, Anne-Marie Kalous and others to monitor rights implementation for disabled people in Malta. Now, I'm thinking in particular, but not exclusively, of their vital contribution to the academic network of European disability experts, or ANED. Their careful analysis has shown how rights frameworks can drive practical change, and yet also how inequalities can and do persist. But the engagement of Malta colleagues with first wave principles goes deeper than monitoring. Consider, for example, Anne-Marie Calus's foundational work on the importance of transforming disability organisations from organisations for disabled people to organisations of, i.e. run by disabled people. That research demonstrated how charity models can persist even in well-meaning service provision, and showing how rights-based approaches require fundamental shifts in power relations. Or think about Claire Azzopardi-Lane's pioneering work on the rights of people with intellectual disabilities or learning disabilities, and how first-wave principles can be extended to groups sometimes overlooked in the early rights movements. Her work on sexual rights and autonomy demonstrates how the social model's emphasis on barrier removal applies across all domains of life. What's particularly striking for me about Malta's engagement with first wave principles is how they've maintained these foundational commitments whilst developing new approaches. Like Siegler's skilled learners who don't abandon effective strategies but add to them, Malta's scholars have shown how rights-based frameworks can be enriched rather than replaced by new theoretical perspectives. And it's this concept of enrichment that brings us to our second wave, where new voices and perspectives would both challenge and enrich the foundation principles laid forth within the first wave. The early 1990s, of course, saw powerful critiques emerge, particularly from feminist scholars, who pointed out that the first wave had reflected predominantly male perspectives. Jenny Morris's groundbreaking work highlighted how the social model, whilst revolutionary, had emerged from a largely white, male, physically impaired experience. Similar critiques emerged about the field's white, heterosexual, global north orientation. Scholars and activists, particularly those with intellectual disabilities or learning disabilities, chronic illnesses, and mental health conditions, argued that we needed to consider a far broader range of experience beyond that of stable physical impairments, experiences that had perhaps dominated and shaped the early discourse. Now, Malta's engagement with this second wave is particularly evident in their pioneering work on intellectual disability and sexuality. Claire Azzopardi-Lane and Anne-Marie Calus's collaborative research broke new ground in both content and method. They explored how people with intellectual or learning disabilities perceive and articulate their sexual identities, revealing how restrictive social attitudes and cultural norms, often shaped by religious values, can limit opportunities for self-expression and relationship building. Their work also demonstrated how people with intellectual disabilities could be meaningfully involved in research about their own lives, whilst tackling subjects previously considered perhaps taboo. This wasn't just about adding new voices, it was about transforming how we think about important issues like capacity, autonomy, and rights. The methodological innovations that developed during this period were crucial. The department's commitment to inclusive research went beyond token participation. Their work showed how research could be genuinely collaborative, developing approaches that respected different ways of knowing and communicating. Now, importantly, these new methodologies didn't abandon first wave principles. Instead, they showed how those principles could be enacted within the research process itself. Anne-Marie Calus's reflections on being an inclusive researcher emphasised the importance of reflexivity and co-creation of knowledge, showing how research practices could themselves dismantle traditional hierarchies between researchers and participants. Wave 2's expansion of focus is particularly evident in the department's attention to family and relationship dynamics. I highlight, as just one example, Amy Kawalleri-Zara's research on disabled parents exposed the persistent barriers they face despite legal protections, particularly the additional scrutiny and negative assumptions experienced by disabled mothers, thus highlighting how gender and disability intersect to create multiple layers of discrimination. The department's engagement with Wave 2 also brought attention to previously overlooked areas of life. Anne-Marie Calus's work on friendship is a good example. And she looked at friendship and reciprocity in the lives of people with intellectual disabilities, showing how seemingly ordinary aspects of life could reveal profound insights about inclusion and belonging. Now, this broadening of perspectives laid crucial groundwork for engagement with Wave 3's theoretical developments. So to Wave 3. As our field matured, this third wave emerged, bringing increased theoretical sophistication to the field. We saw engagement with critical theory, post-structuralism, new materialism, post-humanism, intersectionality, and so on. Scholars began applying these sophisticated theoretical frameworks to understand how disability intersects with many other aspects of identity and experience, how power operates in disability oppression, and how cultural representation shapes societal attitudes. This theoretical turn has brought both opportunities and perhaps certain risks. At its best, this wave provides new tools for understanding complex systems of oppression and for imagining new possibilities for resistance and change. It's helped us to understand how disability intersects with gender, race, sexuality, class, and so on, enriching our analysis of power and exclusion. But there have been some risks, seen in some quarters, of theory becoming disconnected from practical impact, of academic sophistication becoming an end in itself rather than a tool for change. And for me, this is where Malta's engagement with Wave 3 becomes particularly instructive, because their scholars have demonstrated something remarkable: how to engage with sophisticated theoretical frameworks whilst maintaining clear commitment to practical change. Their work shows that theoretical complexity and practical impact aren't opposing forces, but can strengthen each other, and that we can achieve balance. Take Vicky Gauchi's groundbreaking work using new materialist approaches to understanding workplace and assistive technology. By examining how disability emerges through interactions between bodies, technologies, and environments, she offered fresh insights into how workplace barriers operate and, crucially, how they might be dismantled. Her doctoral research introduced the concept of the dis/ability assemblage, showing how ability and disability are co-constructed through complex networks of human and non-human actors in the workplace in particular events. But importantly, this isn't theory for theory's sake. It's sophisticated analysis that reveals how workplace inclusion requires attention to the dynamic interplay between technological, social, and institutional factors. Similarly, if we look at Anne-Marie Calus's work on the cloak of incompetence in film representations, this shows how theoretical analysis can strengthen rights-based advocacy. She reveals how cultural narratives in films like Rain Man and I Am Sam construct intellectual disability as inherent incompetence, concealing people's actual capacities and resilience. The department's engagement with interdisciplinary perspectives demonstrates another crucial aspect of Wave 3. It shows how disability studies can enrich and be enriched by dialogue with other fields, while still maintaining its critical edge and its commitment to social justice. Kurt Borg's work, for example, bridging disability studies and trauma studies, has shown how both fields deal with socially constructed experience of adversity and marginalisation, and his work positions disability as fundamental to understanding the human condition. Or Amy Camilleri-Zara's theoretically informed work on disabled women's experiences shows how intersectional approaches can reveal previously overlooked dimensions of disability experience. Using innovative methodological tools, she has explored how disabled women perceive and construct their identities in relation to body image, career aspirations, and family responsibilities. And I find her research to demonstrate how Wave 3's theoretical sophistication can strengthen rather than dilute the field's commitment to social justice. But for me, what's particularly striking about Malta's engagement with Wave 3 is how they've maintained connection to disabled people's lived experience, even whilst engaging in complex theorising. This balance is evident in their approach to professional practice, whether working with counsellors, healthcare providers, engineers or educators. Their theoretical analyses serve practical goals of improving service provision, promoting rights-based approaches. Often their work leads to concrete recommendations for professional training or changes in service provision. This is so important. And this brings us to what I see as Malta's distinctive contribution to our field, or what I'm going to propose today we might call the Malta approach. What emerged for me when I was reviewing and thinking about the collective contribution of the members of the Department for Disability Studies at the University of Malta, and indeed the wider disability studies community in Malta, is really a distinct approach from which I think we can learn in the wider field. And what's particularly significant or important about the Malta approach, as I suggest we call it, is how it avoids false dichotomies that sometimes trouble our field. Their position perhaps at a distance from some of the more entrenched and at times poisonous debates has perhaps enabled them to show that we don't have to choose between theoretical sophistication and practical relevance, between local engagement and global contribution, between professional expertise and a critical perspective. In fact, I think the Malta approach demonstrates something very important about perspective. From their vantage point at the intersection of different intellectual traditions, with their, should I suggest, post-colonial awareness of power dynamics in knowledge production, these scholars have shown how focused commitment to core principles combined with an openness to diverse perspectives can generate significant impact. Their support for transformations of disabled people's organisations from for to of, their systematic policy analyses and their innovations in inclusive methodologies all demonstrate how theoretical sophistication can serve practical change. Now, in the few moments remaining to me in this lecture, I would now like to consider what lessons we might learn from Malta's disability studies community and make some suggestions for the future of our field. When I look to the future of disability studies, I feel that the Malta approach offers us important lessons. At a time when academic fields often face pressures to prioritise provocation over substance, the work of Malta colleagues demonstrates a different path, one that maintains both intellectual rigour and practical commitment to change. And if I may, I'd like to speak rather plainly about some concerning trends in our field that I feel we should be concerned about. We've witnessed the emergence of what I call a rock star academic approach, particularly, it has to be said, amongst certain male scholars, prioritising provocative declarations over sustained, careful analysis. This style of engagement, manifesting in confrontational presentations or calculated controversy seeking, does little, it seems to me, to advance our understanding or support for disability justice. The pressure to continually produce novel perspectives can lead to superficial engagement with theoretical frameworks rather than deep, sustained development of ideas that can be truly transformative. We've got a tendency, it seems to me at the moment, to start to import concepts from all over the place, not asking if actually there was a concept already in use that was doing that work. There's a lot of reinventing of wheels, dressed up, I fear, in elaborate language, important insights getting abandoned before they're fully developed as we rush to embrace whatever framework is currently in fashion. Now, I welcome theoretical innovation. Indeed, I've not shied away from seeking to develop theoretical approaches in my own work, but I'm very worried about this tendency to flit between perspectives in pursuit of academic fashion rather than genuine insight. Now, of course, this pattern reflects broader issues in academia, the pressure to stand out in a crowded field, to build individual careers. But in disability studies, these pressures have consequences. When we start to prioritise provocative statements or faddish work over careful analysis, we risk undermining the credibility of our field at the precise moment when our insights are most needed in policy and practice. Personal vendettas, public feuds, too often normalised in academic spaces these days, fragment our collective efforts and undermine solidarity necessary for meaningful social change. But what I have learnt from my dear colleagues in Malta is that there is another way. Their work shows that theoretical sophistication can serve clear purpose, helping us understand power relations, identifying points of intervention, connecting forms of oppression and resistance, and supporting disabled people's struggle for justice. We don't need to choose between theoretical complexity and practical impact, but we do need to ensure that our work serves our field's fundamental commitments to disability justice. And this is what I hope for our field's future. Not a turning away from theory, but this understanding that we need both theory and practical innovation if we are to build an inclusive future. And now, as I reach the end of my lecture, and I think I'm only about half a minute over time, which is surprising for me, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening, to wish you all a wonderful celebration. I raise a symbolic toast to the next 10 years and more of the Department of Disability Studies at the University of Malta. I know that you will continue to make waves of positive change. Long may you do so, and I close with admiration and affection. Thank you.